I want to begin. I'm going to sit down for most of this because we're more in a seminar-style discussion setting than a lecture. But I want to begin by thanking my awesome teammates. This is not a single-person project. This is actually the work of many hands and brains. And Alfredo obviously is not physically here, but he's on Skype. You're going to hear from Phil Murphy virtually as well. Fernando is here. Galen, who is our project coordinator, is here. Gail is here. My esteemed co-director for the funding from the Fund for Innovation, Amy McGill. Our new faculty coming on next year who are already participating. Maha and Andrea and Nuket are here. And I'm here too. So this is not one person. This is a lot of people working together. I've been given, actually, as it turns out, 22 minutes, and everybody else 7, because I'm supposed to give the history and the background of this particular story. So I'm going to do that, and I'll be as mindful as I can of the time. So what is Sprintensive? And I'm going to speak to each one of these words. It's a set of pedagogical innovations. It's not a single innovation, which honestly, maybe a year or 2 ago, I thought it was. It's a block schedule. No. It's a set of innovations, and I don't know which of the particular ingredients in this stew are most significant, but they work or don't work as a stew. So here are the ingredients in the stew. There's the block scheduling. Students come in, they take one class at a time, and they take that class Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, in other words. And they start at 8 o'clock, and I'm doing a morning meditation, so they're pretty much there at 8 o'clock, right? You are. Amazingly, they're there at 8 o'clock. And they have 3 weeks together under this format, and then they have a little opportunity to continue working in their project teams to wrap up loose ends, but they're not in class. And the time that they have is anywhere between 3 and 5 days. And then they start again with the next class. One of the most exciting innovations, I think, is this really fantastically coherent set of offerings. There's a theme that runs through Sprintensive, which this year is sustainability. And we have projects, something called Spike, which I'll talk about in a moment, which takes what's learned in each of the 4 modules and puts it together in some magical product that we haven't yet seen, although their Spike progress reports are due today. And we also have 3 colloquia that are distributed through the semester that bring together some of these insights, and they're all doing projects that in some way or another relate to sustainability in a specific disciplinary context. Everybody loves a good time. And there are social events that are built into the program. There's one structured social event, and there are several informal opportunities that include early morning breakfast. But what I've noticed, and I'll talk about this a bit more, is they also tend to eat lunch together. You know, we break at noon, and then I go out and I sit around and just have people chat with me, usually in small groups, but we're no longer in class. And if I go into Sampson, some of them will sit next to me and have lunch with me as well. And they're just hanging together. We'll talk about what that means in a moment. It's an all or nothing deal. You can't just take one course. You have to take all 4. So you're not signing up for Sprintensive, and I'll take 2 courses and see how the rest work. You're signing up for 4 courses, and the cohort is 30 students, as you probably know by now. Kent talked about them as the Walking Dead. But they didn't sign up for Sprintensive. They did, but they also agreed that they would be taking these 4 courses, and they forfeit their opportunity to choose other courses for the most part, not entirely. Some of them are taking language, some of them are doing weekend workshops or late in the day courses. But basically, if you sign up, you're taking the 4 offerings. There's a really heavy emphasis on skills development. You learn something, you try it out. Often in the company of others on groups or work teams. But there's a lot of work on teaming, per se. So I want to just stand on a soapbox for a second and say, we really believe that one of the things we do is help people learn how to do team type projects together. But actually, we just tell people, go form a team and do the project. We never tell them how to form a team, what makes for good teaming behaviors, what are techniques you can use to team effectively. But here there is a set of activities specifically around self-awareness, team awareness. There's a team contract. There is a DISC assessment, which many of you are familiar with. There is work that Melissa has done with us around something called the Team Accelerator. And they've all been trained, thanks to, again, to Melissa, in taking their DISC profile and understanding what flexing they need to do in order to work effectively. This is the first time in my experience on campus where as much attention was devoted to how to team effectively as to what the deliverable of your teaming would be. I mentioned that we have, by design, an integrative activity that carries a thread. It's the needle that carries the thread across the 4 classes, and it's called Sprintensive Integrative Knowledge Exchange, or SPIKE. It's either an individual or a tiny group project, and they'll be presenting this at a final colloquium. And finally, and I think maybe even most importantly, those of us, and it says intense faculty collaboration, and I just apologize. It was intense team collaboration, and I don't know why I only wrote the word faculty, but from the faculty vantage point, we each know what has gone on or what is going on in each other's courses. People are drawing on what they did with Ferdinando. People are talking about some of the paradigms that Alfredo introduced for emergent learning. So this idea of intense team collaboration, but particularly, if I can say, at the faculty level where the teaching takes place for the most part, knowing, understanding, and appreciating. There's been a lot of cross-observation for the 3rd time this week, I guess, or in the last few days. Andrea's been in my classroom. I'm just accustomed to seeing her there now. And that's what we mean by a set of pedagogical innovations. I don't think it's about block scheduling at all, but block scheduling is an ingredient in the stew, and without that ingredient, the stew probably wouldn't have much of a taste. So what came out of this? If that was the what I presented, then here's the so what. What's come out of this is a distinctive learning community that doesn't look like anything else that, again, I've been here since '92. It doesn't look like anything else that I've seen. And it's characterized by a community that is relationship rich, and I mean not only student to student, but the team itself. I just can't explain what one of our team meetings look like, but it's like the most fun that most of us have in a given week. Is that fair? Mm-hmm. I mean, you probably hear us down the hall if you're in McCollum when any of this is going on. So it's faculty to students, faculty or team to teammate, and student to student. It's an extraordinarily rich set of relationships that have been nurtured and developed. We have advertised from the very outset it would be feedback rich. Why feedback rich? It's a 4-hour class, which means that there's more time for application. So you do something, you try it out, and you get feedback right away. And they're working with us not as the sage on the stage, as some of us have expressed the role of a traditional professor, but more as mentors. And then finally, it's an intentional learning community. Everybody knows what every feature is supposed to accomplish, and the vocabulary around these features is a shared vocabulary. So I was asked to talk about the history. The main thing I want to say is that the history is at least 9 years old, or 13 years old, depending on how you want to count. 13 years in the sense that DPMI was launched about that time far back. And a lot of the learning that we observed in DPMI, we had 2 external evaluators at 2 different points in time assess DPMI. And what we learned, again, was that these longer classes with social activities tended to produce a level of social capital that contributed to learning. So taking that experience of learning from DPMI and then bringing it forth with a team that included, let's see, I just saw Michelle here, and Nuket was on the team, and I don't think, Fernando, you were on that team too, weren't you? The original Sprintensive team?
The 9 years ago.
The 9 years ago team.
Yeah. And
Amy was not part of the team, but very much engaged in the process. For those of you who have long memories, this was the pizza group process. And for those of you who don't have the privilege of having memories that go back that far because you had lives to lead somewhere else, it was an opportunity to engage in a competition for innovations that could improve the quality of teaching and learning at the Institute. And we got funding as a result of this idea initially, but we weren't able to take it up to the next step for a number of reasons. So that's the history of it. So let me go to, I think, the most important thing that I wanted to say about my class, and then I'll talk about what I learned. So the theme in each class is sustainability. In my class, the sustainability unfolds in terms of sustainability of benefits. If you have impact, what sustains the impact? And also the extent to which cultural context dictates the extent of sustainability. We take a relatively anti-scale-up approach, putting more weight on contextualization of interventions. And we've been talking about being subversive practitioners as well, and what it means to raise questions in the context of evaluation that make you either a thorn in the side of your colleagues or a hero, depending on how receptive they are to emergent learning. So each of us has taken a different approach to sustainability, but our focus is evaluating for sustainability. There's a little sustainability framework that we've introduced. I think that sustainability is the launching pad that allows students easily to translate from Module 1 to 2 to 3. Even if it's somewhat of an artifice, to be sure, it just creates a framework where learning transfer of knowledge is accommodated more easily and more receptively. So that's what I wanted to say about sustainability. So what makes this thing work? And I don't know that it works, but we have preliminary feedback from the evaluation that we're doing. It is being evaluated by an external evaluator, Ilana Dean, who is in the Middlebury community, not a faculty member, but married to a faculty member at Middlebury. There's a team that has worked with her to gather data. We've had 2 infusions of input from her in terms of early findings. And those findings suggest that there is something that is on target. And I will share at the end of today, just before I came here, I asked students in the class, what should I deliver? What's the message that I should deliver to you? And I'll read that at the very end as my closing comment. But it is definitely very rich in evaluation. So I'm able to say some things already about what I think the secret sauce is. And the most interesting is the social capital at every level, whether it's the Sprintensive team, the faculty and others who make up that team, including the new faculty coming on. We just spent a lot of time together, an amazing amount of time together, and have developed not only a social connection, but an intellectual connection that, again, in my time at MIIS, I hadn't really experienced to this degree. There's this pivot that I want to talk about. We stopped talking about, this is what I'm doing in my module. It's now about, this is what we're doing in Sprintensive. Here's how I'm going to take care of my piece. But we're not looking at it as my course in a single set of courses. It's really an integrated set of courses where the linkages are very intentionally constructed. I want to say something about social capital in the context of teamwork. I asked a couple of days ago why it was that my particular group was doing better than any group that I'd ever taught before on the same material. So many of you know that I teach program evaluation. This is a group of 30. My typical enrollment level for a seminar and program evaluation is somewhere between 12 and 18 at the top. So 30 people for a seminar seems like an oxymoron in extremis. But actually what's happened, and I've noticed this without a trace of doubt, is that they're learning better. They actually are performing at a higher level of proficiency than any group that I've taught this course to, including the group that I teach it to at Emory, which is a pretty selective program. And so I commented, and I said, why do you think it is that you're learning better? You are learning better. You may not know because you don't have a basis of comparison, but I know. Why are you learning better? And the answer that came out, actually more or less the way I'm going to say it, is we have higher social capital. It makes it easier to ask a question without being embarrassed. It makes it easier to go to a colleague and get a clarification. It's not embarrassing. And then when it comes to the social capital, they are able to work better, not ideally yet, but better in team projects, partly because they're not just doing what I think of as contracting out the work on a team project. You do this, you do this, you do this, I'll see you in 3 weeks, and good luck. The teaming is happening under our eyes, and so they're able to get more time, face time together in addition to the social time. The intentional contact linkages I talked about, evaporation-free learning. So between class 1 and class 2, or class 3 and class 5, at most 2 days have passed. There's not much seepage, and that's really exciting. I think that's one of the reasons why they're going faster also. As they practice more, because there is time for more practice, they seem more self-confident in terms of their ability to use skills. And then most of the courses, including 3 of the 4, actually have a client, a real-life client. And so participants are working with clients. So that's what I think the secret sauce is. And to add to that, as I mentioned earlier, just a lot of discussion. What are we learning? What can we do better? Both in our team meetings, we've got one coming up on Monday, asking students and having students come to us and tell us what we can be doing better. Having Ilana and her team, we're just learning a lot about teaching and learning in general at the Institute. So I'm going to finish this off by just doing a rundown on what I've learned pedagogically speaking, what I call tradecraft. How do we communicate with students? And these are my own lessons. In my module, and I believe in Alfredo's module, and perhaps in Phil's, less so in Fernando's, the classroom is flipped. I'm only using classroom time, or almost only using classroom time, for application of content that's acquired elsewhere, primarily through simplified readings, lighter and simpler readings. So they actually get more mastery, as it turns out, with lighter and simpler readings. We change activities every 30 minutes, and they not only change activities, they have to actually get up and move to a different table with different people. So just having the spatial change of perspective, the interpersonal change of perspective multiple times during a class seems to be quite powerful. It's impossible for me to give feedback in real time to 30 people. But we've developed some really interesting systems for doing this. Andrea has actually had a chance to observe some of this recently. Their teamwork is always posted to a Google Doc, and then after each exercise, the group looks at everybody else's work and nominates the best case, the strongest response, and then we collectively try to improve on that response, and then they compare their own response to the collectively produced best response. So in fact, you could give really great feedback to 30 people, but I don't personally have to do it all. Again, less is more, fewer readings. Lecture only as a last resort. I've done something that I learned about actually as a result of Andrea and some of her colleagues at the college, which is I'm using 2 minutes of time at the beginning of every class to have people focus on an intentionality for the day. And the intentionality, I give a little prompt. Is it the question that you want to ask? Is it how you'll work on your, with your teammates? Is it going to be the content that we're working on yesterday, making sure that you really can crush it today? And one of the byproducts of this intentionality time is people do seem more focused. And more interestingly, they come on time, because at 8 o'clock the door closes when we start the intentionality, and you're not allowed to enter in the middle of the intentionality exercise. One of the things that I learned from Alfredo is that if we're doing client-based projects with a Sprintensive model, You have to pre-select the client. You can't let your students go and spend time selecting the client. So in my class, I am working with the Eurasia Foundation in Kazakhstan with an alum who gave us 4 projects to evaluate, and then I opened it up to students to propose other projects where they already had a running start. So we're doing 7, we're working with 4 projects for 1 client and then 3 more clients. And everything is linked to real-world practice. So to finish, what did I personally learn? I learned that 30 students is a richer and more interesting and more compelling learning community than 12 or 15 for the kind of content that I'm delivering. I never realized how impoverished I was with only 12 students. I thought it was cool. 30 turns out to be a whole lot better. I would like to show you a picture of who's taking Sprintensive, because if you looked at the picture right away, what would you notice? English-speaking white people are a minority in this group. Males are not a minority in this group. The number of people from Africa in this group leaves everybody else with about 0, because I think we have 4. Number of international students, we've got a lot of them. It's the most diverse group I've ever seen, and if you ask, as I have, why is this group so diverse? It's because people were hungering for relationships. And if you're, and I'm going to use this word in quotation marks, if you're an other or perceive yourself in this community to be an other, you might be bypassed and marginalized, but you're not in this community. Less really is more, and Sprintensive is a sprint. It's not with a G, because it's not about springing. It's about sprinting. And what happens in a sprint is you don't really have a time to kind of let it all hang out and relax. There's time between instructional modules, but during the instructional module, it pretty much is an all-out experience. And I don't know whether this is scalable or not. So.